She's always got something going on, Sterling Hale said, not bothering to drop his voice. Tell her to come back when she doesn't. He said it to his assistant, Davis, in the marble lobby of the Hale building on a Tuesday afternoon, surrounded by 4 members of his executive team and 2 men in suits whose names Tilda had never learned. He said it with the particular tiredness of a man who had already made a decision and considered the conversation finished. Tilda was 12 feet away. She had been waiting 17 minutes in that lobby, holding 2 cups of coffee in a paper carrier because she'd brought one for Davis by accident, a habit she'd never quite broken. Her hair was pulled back in the kind of bun that had started the morning tidy and had since given up entirely. There was flour on her left sleeve that she hadn't noticed until right now. She had been trying to get 3 minutes with Sterling Hale for 4 days. Not because she wanted anything from him, not because she had a complaint or a request, or any of the things that a woman in her position might theoretically be expected to carry to the man whose company occupied the top 12 floors of the building where she ran her cafe. She needed to tell him something. Something that required her to be in the same room with him and say it out loud the way certain things can only exist once they've been said out loud. She stood in the lobby and processed what she had just heard. Then she pressed her lips together once, nodded at nobody, and walked back toward the cafe. Tilda Marsh had opened Copper Door Coffee 2.5 years ago in the ground floor retail space of the Hale building, a choice that had made sense on paper and had continued to make sense in ways she hadn't anticipated. The building held 1,100 employees across 30 floors. People who needed coffee at 7 in the morning. People who needed somewhere to eat lunch that wasn't their desk. People who needed a place to sit for 15 minutes where nobody expected anything from them. Copper Door had become that place. She was 31 years old, and she ran the cafe the way she ran most of her life, with a quality of constant motion that other people perceived as energy, and she knew was something closer to necessity. She had Beau, who was 6, who had his father's dark eyes and her stubbornness and a laugh she could pick out of a crowded room from 30 feet. She had Agnes, who was technically her longest tenured employee and actually her lifeline, who picked Beau up from school on the days Tilda's schedule ran long, which was most days. She had not had a full night of sleep since Beau was born. She had not told anyone that. She had also not told anyone about the appointment she'd missed 3 weeks ago with a cardiologist at St. Vincent's. The one her GP had referred her to after a routine EKG flagged something that her GP called worth looking into, in the careful tone doctors use when they mean something more urgent than the words suggest. She had rescheduled twice. The 3rd appointment was next Thursday. She was fairly certain she wasn't going to make that one either. The morning Sterling said what he said had started the way most of her mornings started, before anyone else arrived. She was at Copper Door by 5:30, not because the cafe opened until 7, but because she'd noticed 2 months ago that the building's overnight security team, 4 men rotating 12-hour shifts, never had access to hot food between midnight and 7. She'd mentioned it once to the head of overnight security, a man named Bram, who had worked in this building for 19 years and who responded to most things with a single nod that managed to convey both acknowledgement and mild exhaustion. Bram had said there was a budget process for that kind of thing. Tilda had nodded back and never mentioned it again. She had started leaving a thermos and a covered plate on the security desk every night instead. 8 weeks, roughly $40 a week out of her own pocket, folded so smoothly into her closing routine that it had stopped feeling like a decision. Bram had never said a word about it. She hadn't either. One evening, she'd come back for a forgotten charger and found a small handwritten note on the desk. "Thank you for the soup last Thursday. It was the best thing that's happened to me in 3 months." The handwriting was Bram's. She'd kept it in her apron pocket for 2 days before it fell apart in the wash. She thought about it sometimes when she was tired. That Tuesday, she had been awake since 4:15 because Beau had a nightmare and needed water, and then needed 5 minutes of her sitting on the edge of his bed before he'd let himself go back to sleep. She'd sat there in the dark, listening to his breathing slow, and thought, I should reschedule that cardiologist appointment. I should do it today. She thought that most mornings. She thought it, and then the day began, and the thought dissolved into everything else. By the time Sterling crossed the lobby at 2:47 with his executive team and his particular quality of forward motion, the kind that sent people instinctively stepping aside, Tilda had been on her feet for 9 hours. She'd eaten half a granola bar over the sink at 11 and called it lunch. Her head had been doing something behind her eyes for the past 3 hours that she refused to name. She had seen the gap in his schedule. Davis, one of Copperdoor's regulars, had mentioned without quite meaning to that the 3 o'clock call had moved to Thursday. She had thought, this is the window. She had picked up the coffee carrier and walked out to the lobby. She had been wrong. What Davis told her afterward, in a quiet and pained voice, was that Sterling hadn't meant for her to hear it, that he was tired, that the morning had been difficult, that these things came out wrong sometimes. Tilda said she understood because she always did. She carried her coffee cups back behind the counter and started the end-of-day clean that she would normally have left for the closing staff. She sent the closing staff home early. She didn't examine why. Agnes had Beau. The evening was managed. Tilda moved through the familiar architecture of closing, wiping counters, draining the espresso machine, running the final inventory, with the automatic efficiency of someone who had done this so many times the body did it without being asked. She was not thinking about Sterling's words specifically. She was thinking about them the way you think about a bruise, not directly, but always aware of the pressure, the faint tightness in her ribs each time she breathed. She had wanted to tell him about the cardiologist. Not because he had any obligation to know, not because it would change anything about her work, which was hers alone. She had wanted to tell him because she had been coming into this building every single morning for 2.5 years, because she knew which of his VPs took oat milk and which ones needed 2 sugars, because she had learned to read the temperature of his mornings by the set of his shoulders when he crossed the lobby, because she had, without deciding to, started to think of this place as somewhere she belonged, in some small and unspoken way. She had wanted someone in this building to know she was scared. That was all. That was the whole of it. She finished the inventory at 7:42 and sat down on the low stool behind the counter where the extra aprons hung. Just for one moment of being no one's anything, not Beau's mom, not the cafe owner, not the woman who'd been waiting in the lobby with a coffee nobody asked her to bring. The headache shifted. It wasn't a headache anymore. It was something with a different quality, a pressure behind her eyes that moved, that had weight, that didn't respond the way headaches responded to stillness. Her hands felt strange, distant, the way a limb feels when something has been compressed wrong for too long. She thought, I should call the cardiologist tonight. I'll call tonight. She thought, I'm going to sit here for just another minute. She sat. She did not get up again. Bram found her at 8:21. He would never be fully able to explain why he went to check on Copperdoor that evening. Nothing in his rounds required it. The cafe was locked. The lights were off. There was no protocol that sent him down that hallway at that hour. He went because something in the evening felt wrong in the way that 19 years of reading a building teaches you to notice things you can't name. He found her slumped sideways behind the counter, one hand open on the floor, the other still curled around the edge of the stool, like she'd been trying to hold on to something and hadn't quite managed it. He was on his radio in 4 seconds. The call reached Sterling Hale through Davis, who knocked on the conference room door without waiting for permission, which had never happened in 3 years. Sterling looked up from the table and read Davis's face before a word was spoken. It's Tilda, Davis said, from the cafe. She collapsed. They're calling an ambulance. Sterling was out of his chair before the sentence finished. 3 of the 4 people at the table had worked with him for years. None of them had ever seen him move like that. Not toward a crisis, not toward an exit, not toward anything that wasn't a negotiation in his favor. They sat and watched the conference room door swing shut and listened to footsteps in the hall going faster than footsteps in that building were ever supposed to go. He rode with her in the ambulance. The paramedic asked if he was family. Sterling said yes without hesitating, and no one questioned it, and he sat 3 feet from Tilda Marsh the entire drive to St. Vincent's while she gave him nothing because she couldn't. She was unconscious. She couldn't tell him what she'd been trying to say that afternoon, or why there was flour on her sleeve, or what the second coffee had been for. She couldn't give him anything. He sat with that the whole way. The ear doctor was young and efficient, with the particular tiredness that lived permanently in the faces of people who worked emergency medicine. She found Sterling in the waiting room at 50 minutes and said his name with the measured tone of someone who'd been told who he was and hadn't decided yet what to make of that. Miss Marsh is stable, brief, factual, the clinical clarity of someone who'd learned that families needed precision more than comfort. What we're looking at is a combination of issues that built over time. Severe dehydration, chronic nutritional deficit, the kind that accumulates when someone's been missing meals regularly, not dramatically, just consistently, for months. Clinical exhaustion. She paused. Her body made the decision her mind had been overriding. Sterling said nothing. There's a referral in her things. The doctor reached into her clipboard and produced a printout, a schedule, the kind you pull from a phone and fold into a pocket. On the back, small handwriting. Reminders. A name repeated, Bo Pickup 315, don't forget. And in the corner, underlined twice, call Dr. Reeves cardiology. Thursday. Do not reschedule. She had an arrhythmia flagged 6 weeks ago, the doctor said. Minor in isolation. Combined with her other levels, it's what triggered the collapse. A pause that had something quiet in it, something careful. She was supposed to follow up 3 weeks ago. Why didn't she go? The doctor looked at him. I was hoping you might have some insight into that. Davis brought him Tilda's phone 3 hours later. Her emergency contact was Agnes, who had come to the hospital in 20 minutes and stayed until it was clear that Bo needed someone. And then she had quietly handed the phone to Davis and asked him to keep it safe. Davis left it on the chair next to Sterling and walked away without explanation. Sterling looked at the phone for a long time. He was a man who read contracts, proposals, briefing documents, intelligence summaries. He read things to extract information. He had a system for what he gave his attention to, and the system had always served him. He opened the voice memos. There were 41 of them. He started with the oldest. Most were reminders, practical, rapid. Tilda's voice clipped the way it got when she was moving fast. Reorder oat milk. The shipment was short. Bo's dentist Tuesday. Agnes's birthday is the 14th. Get something from that shop she likes on Maple. Ordinary life caught in 30-second snapshots. He listened and kept listening and didn't decide to keep listening. The decision was made by the voice instead of by him. He found his name on the 7th memo. Sterling Hale takes his coffee at 170, no sleeve, black, pulled right at the shot. He's less sharp when he skips it. The 8:45 call ran long this morning, and he hadn't come through yet, and I could hear it in the lobby. He's got a lot on him right now. I'm going to start pulling his shot at 8:30 in case he doesn't make it down in time. He'll think it's coincidence. Sterling sat with that. He found a memo from 6 weeks ago. Her voice was different in that one, slower, moving around something as she spoke. Got a letter from the cardiologist today. It said some moderate concern, which is doctor language for something. I just don't know what yet. Called to make the appointment. Next available is 3 weeks out. That's fine. That's manageable. A pause that was longer than it should have been. Bo's got his school thing Thursday, and Agnes is off Friday, so I'll figure out the logistics. It's fine. I'll figure it out. She had said it's fine the way people say things that are not fine. He found the memo from 4 days ago. 20 seconds. Almost nothing. I need to tell someone. I don't know why I keep thinking it should be him. It's not his job to care. He doesn't. We're not. It's not that. A breath. I just want someone to know I'm scared. That's all. I'm scared, and the building is big, and I'm so tired, and I keep almost saying it, and then the moment closes and I can't get it back. Her voice was very even. The practiced even of someone who had been keeping things level for a long time. It's fine. Tomorrow, I'll catch him tomorrow. Tomorrow had not come. Sterling sat in the waiting room until the sky outside went from black to gray. Then he stood up and went to find the doctor. He was in the room for 10 minutes before Tilda opened her eyes. She looked at him the way she might have looked if she'd found him in any ordinary context, with a flicker of surprise quickly smoothed, and then a quality of attention that was simply hers, the specific way she looked at things when she meant it entirely. "You didn't have to come back," she said. Her voice was rough at the edges. "I know." He pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down, close enough that she didn't have to turn far. "The cardiologist appointment. 3 weeks ago." Her expression moved through something. "You went through my things. Your phone was with Davis. I listened to your voice memos." He said it plainly, without dressing it up. "I should have asked. I didn't ask." She looked at the ceiling, then back at him. "How many did you listen to?" "All of them." She closed her eyes. "You pulled my shot at 8:30 for 4 months," he said, "because you thought I was sharper before the 9 o'clock call. You noticed." "I didn't," he said. "Not once." He let that sit. "You've been leaving food at the security desk every night for 8 weeks. That's not—" "Tilda," he stopped her gently. "You put my schedule in the margin of your cardiology referral as the reason you hadn't gone. You wrote, 'Hail board week. Wait until after.'" She said nothing. "There is no board week," he said. "On this earth, that is a valid reason for you to put off a cardiac referral." The word cardiac landed in the room between them like something with weight. "I need you to understand that." She looked at her hands on the blanket. They were just resting there, open, nothing in them. "I know," she said finally. "I know it's not logical. I kept thinking things could wait. Everything always felt like it could wait a little longer." "They couldn't, Twunt." "No, very quiet, they couldn't." He reached over and put his hand over hers, not as a gesture, not to make a point. He just put his hand there, covering both of hers completely, and left it there. She looked down at their hands, and she didn't move away. "What were you trying to tell me?" he said. She took a breath, let it out slowly. "I wanted someone to know I was scared. That's all it was. The letter came and I kept rescheduling, and I kept telling myself it was fine, and it stopped feeling fine somewhere around week 3, and you were the person I kept wanting to tell." She said it without looking at him. "I know we're not. I know that doesn't make any logical sense, given that you and I don't." "It makes sense," he said. She looked at him. "I just wish you'd been able to say it," he said, "and I wish I had made it possible for you to say it before this." She looked at the window. The early morning light was starting, gray, pale, the particular color that came right before the sky decided to be something. "I heard what you said in the lobby." "I know." His voice was level. "I'm not going to explain it in a way that makes it something different than it was. I'm sorry." She was quiet for a long time, then okay. Not forgiveness, not a resolution, just a door left slightly ajar, which was how she left most things, careful and provisional and real. His CFO called while Sterling was in the hallway, getting coffee from the floor machine. Aldrich had been with the Hale Group for 8 years. He managed the structural financial architecture across the company's subsidiary holdings, the accounts, the lease arrangements for the building's retail spaces, the instruments that most people never looked at twice because they were designed to never require looking at. He was meticulous. He had never given Sterling a reason to look sideways at his work. "I need to tell you something," Aldrich said. His voice was wrong in the specific way it was wrong, when a man already knew he'd been caught and had decided that confessing first was the only card left. The Copper Door lease had been structured 18 months ago through a holding account Aldrich managed. What he had built into that structure, quietly, in layers that would have required a forensic audit to locate, was a secondary conduit, a way for a portion of the rent payments and certain vendor transactions to route through accounts that belonged to nobody in the building. They belonged to a shell entity that Aldrich's brother-in-law had been operating for 2 years. Tilda had no idea. Aldrich knew that. He had chosen her specifically because she was exactly what she appeared to be, someone who paid on time, kept clean records, never questioned the accounting architecture of her lease because she had no reason to, and ran her business with enough transparent integrity that no one would look at Copper Door twice. She was the best possible cover. She wasn't covering anything. Sterling stood in the hospital hallway and looked at the door to Tilda's room. "She's in the hospital," he said. Aldrich was quiet. "She collapsed last night," Sterling said, "in the cafe, alone, after hours." He let that sit in the silence between them. "She's been running herself into the ground in that building for 2.5 years, and you put her there specifically because that's the kind of person she is." Aldrich said nothing. "I want the full account architecture," Sterling said. "Everything, the routing, the entities, the timeline. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, this goes to legal and you won't have any choices left." He ended the call. He told her everything, not efficiently, not compressed into the language he used across negotiating tables. He told her the way she deserved to be told, completely, from the beginning. The lease, Aldrich, the shell accounts. The way she had been chosen deliberately, because her integrity was so legible that it made the perfect blind. Tilda sat in the hospital bed and listened with her hands flat on the blanket and her face doing the work of processing without shutting down. She was not a dramatic listener. She didn't gasp or interrupt or let her expression run ahead of her thinking. She listened the way she always listened, completely, her attention entirely present. When he finished, the room was quiet. "He used my cafe," she said. "Yes." She said it again, not for emphasis, but turning it over, the way you examine something from every angle before you accept its shape. "And I didn't know." "You didn't know." He held her gaze. "He chose you because you were exactly who you appeared to be. Your consistency was the point. Your character was the cover, and you never had any part of building it." She looked at her hands. "What happens to him?" "Legal mechanisms. He's already been removed. The accounts are frozen. He will face real consequences." A pause, not violent ones. She studied him. "You mean that?" "Yes." She nodded once, slow, accepting the distinction the way she accepted most things, carefully and watching. "And Copper Door?" "The lease will be restructured. Clean account, no secondary routing." He looked at her steadily. "If you want to stay." She looked at him for a long moment. "Do you want me to stay?" "Yes." She almost smiled. She was discharged on a Friday afternoon into October air that hadn't decided what it wanted to be. Sterling was there when she came through the hospital doors. Not with a car, not with Davis. Just him in a jacket slightly too light for the weather, holding a coffee cup in a paper carrier. She stopped on the sidewalk. "That's from Copper Door." "Agnes opened for me at 6. He held it out. I asked how you took it." She took the cup. She held it with both hands. "You could have just asked me." "I know," he said it simply. "I'm practicing." She looked at the cup and then at him. Something settled in her chest. Not a resolution, not an answer, but a quality of ease she hadn't felt in a very long time. The specific ease of being somewhere she did not have to manage her own visibility. "Bo wants to know if you have a dog," she said. Sterling blinked. "What?" "He's been asking everyone we know. He's running a full campaign." She started walking. "I told him I'd pass along the inquiry." Sterling fell into step beside her. "I don't have a dog." "He's going to try to fix that." "Is he usually successful?" She considered this. "He got Agnes to switch her car. A beat. You've been warned." Sterling was quiet for a few steps. Then, "Tell him I'm open to being convinced." She looked over at him. He was looking straight ahead, his expression the particular almost nothing that she had spent 2.5 years learning to read. There was something in it today that hadn't been there before. something without the forward motion quality that usually occupied his face. He was just walking, just present. "Okay," she said. The same words she'd said in the hospital, the same not a beginning and not a conclusion. The same door left slightly open, which was how she left everything that mattered, careful and provisional and entirely real. She had a cardiologist appointment on Monday, already in her phone. She had made it herself, without rescheduling, without writing anyone else's name in the margin. She was going to keep it. That she had decided was where she would start.